and I'm going to give you a little demo of how to use DoDater. DoDater is a calculator product for iPod and iPod Touch and iPhone, and also can be used on the iPad, and it's for calculating gestational ages and any obstetrical date calculation that you might need. It's really intended for medical professionals because it has all the technical language and technical things that an obstetrician or family practitioner or anybody doing obstetrics will need. Lay people may use it as well, but it is really a little bit more technical than some of the other products out there, and that's why this instruction video is somewhat helpful. So DoDater has multiple pages, and we'll look at the first page, which is the primary page that we'll be using every time we use DoDater. At the top, we see right here where it says DoDater as of today, and that means that every calculation we make is going to be assuming that we care about what is going on today. Now, anytime we push these buttons on the right, we're going to be able to change these dates. And so right here, where it says today, we can click on it and say that we care about a different date. And you'll notice, let's say we move it to January 15th, and you'll notice it says as of 1/15. And that means that all calculations will be made as if we care about the 15th of January. But let's go ahead and put it back to today, and you notice that when we move it to the day that we're currently at, it changes to say today. Now, this part right here at the top shows the results of our calculation. It says that the due date we've selected is the 17th of January of 2011, EDD, meaning estimated date of delivery. And here it shows how far along we are today, because today is the reference date. And we'll notice if we change the reference date, it's 39 and 4/7 weeks on the 14th. So again, this is correlated to the reference date. So we'll go back to today. And then here it shows us how we're calculating it. So in this case, we're calculating by LMP, which is last menstrual period. We can also calculate by ultrasound, EDD, which is a stated due date, or also best dates, which is going to use both the LMP and the ultrasound to calculate which date is most accurate. Now, to change the preferred dating method, there's two ways to do that. One is that we can change it right here by clicking on these different segmented controls, and that's going to tell us which criteria we want to use to calculate the due date. The other thing is that when we select different dates and we change them, DoDater is automatically going to go to that one. So we just changed the due date by the stated EDD, and we're assuming that that's the one we care about because that's what we just changed, and we notice that it jumped right to EDD. But if we are going to look at the LMP, you'll notice it jumped right to LMP. So that's very convenient because typically when you change it, that's the one you're going to care about. So the LMP, of course, is the last menstrual period. That's generally, pregnancy generally ends 40 weeks after LMP, and that's how DoDater is calculating. DoDater is calculating by counting the number of seconds between individual dates, so it's always correct. It's counting for leap years, it's counting for daylight savings changes, because Apple inherently knows these changes in its own date accounting system, and while some programs use Nagel's rule, which is really rather rough because it doesn't take account just at various changes like daylight savings, DoDater is always correct because Apple always knows these different time changes, and we're actually using the inherent dating method that Apple uses, and so for that reason, DoDater is always going to be correct. So if we change LMP, you'll notice that we get a change here. So if the patient's last menstrual period was on the 10th of April, then she's currently 40 and 2/7 weeks, and her due date is the 15th of 2011. Now, if we select EDD, now we're using this EDD right here, and in this case, the EDD is 1/18/11, which is what was selected here. She's 39 and 6/7 weeks today, based on the stated EDD. Now let's look at the ultrasound, because this is a little bit more complicated. You can see here we have several different controls. The reason why we have these different controls is that every ultrasound has three data points. One is the date the ultrasound was performed, one is how far along the patient was when the ultrasound was performed, and one is the due date that the ultrasound produced. So these three numbers are interrelated, and if you change any two of them, then the third one is going to change. So in this case, we have a locking mechanism here that says that we can't change this one that's locked, and ultimately that's choosing the dependent variable. So in this case, we have EDD locked, which means that if I change the date of the ultrasound, it's going to keep this 20 and 0/7 weeks, and it's going to change the EDD. So let's say that I know that a person had an ultrasound and she had it done on June 24th, 2010, and the patient says, well, doctor, when I had that done, I was 35 and 6/7 weeks. Based on that, the due date is 7/25/10. And that's really helpful because particularly when you get a radiology report, they often will tell you the date that the scan was done, of course, and they'll tell you how far along the pregnancy was, but they often won't tell you the due date because they don't have those kinds of software in their ultrasound machine. So it's very helpful for that. And you'll notice that right now it says out of range because her due date is 7/25/10, and today is out in 2011, and that would be a pregnancy that would have already been delivered. But let's say we change the reference date. So her due date is 7/25/10. Why don't we go back to say May 23rd, 2010? Well, on May 23rd, 2010, she was 31 and 0/7 weeks based on the ultrasound dates that we gave. And so that's right here. Now let's do another example. Let's say the patient doesn't know how far along she was in the ultrasound, but you really want to know because you want to know for, say, second trimester screening for aneuploidy screening, like an MSAFP test or a quad screen. And so the patient says, well, I had my ultrasound done on March 24th of 2010, and they gave me a due date of October 25th, 2010. Well, I know at that time she was 9 and 2/7 weeks, so she would have been too early for a quad screen. But let's say they gave her a due date of August 25th. Well, then she was 18 and 0/7 weeks. So you can see how this will be very helpful for that kind of situation when we have to know how far along somebody was when they had the ultrasound. And so if they know the date and they know the due date they gave them, which patients often do, then we'll be able to put that in. Now, best dates in this case is really helpful, not so much for trained obstetricians because we usually kind of know this just inherently, but particularly helpful for medical students that don't yet understand all the dating theory. Best dates is going to take all the numbers that we've put in, particularly the LMP and our ultrasound dates, and decide which one is most accurate. So in this case, these things are way off each other, so it's going to know that it's the ultrasound. And in this case, it's going to say it's an 18-week ultrasound. Her due date is August 25th, 2010, and she's 26 and 4/7 weeks. So in this case, we can see, for example, right when due date loads, we have an LMP and an ultrasound that are concordant because you have an LMP date that has an EDD of 1/17/11. You have an ultrasound due date of also 1/17/11, and the ultrasound was done at 20 weeks, so that's going to be a due date that is based on an LMP consistent with an ultrasound, and it's going to say LMP consistent with 20-week ultrasound. Now, let's say that ultrasound changes a little bit, and now we're here. So now best dates, we're still going to see that. We're still 40 and 0/7 weeks, but now it's LMP consistent with a 19-week ultrasound because as we know, an ultrasound done at 19 weeks is accurate to about 14 days, and that's what due dater's using. If it's within 14 days for a 19-week ultrasound, then it'll say it's consistent. Now let's say the ultrasound was done at 8 weeks. So now it's a 7-week ultrasound, or a 7-week ultrasound. So now the ultrasound is 7 weeks, so we know that it's quite accurate, and it's so far off the due date. The due date by the LMP was 1/17, whereas the ultrasound was 4/18. So if we say best dates, it's going to say that the 7-week ultrasound is more accurate. So basically, best dates is deciding which is more accurate, the ultrasound or the LMP. And if it's a first trimester ultrasound, it'll be accurate to 7 days. If it's a second trimester ultrasound, it'll be to 14 days. And if it's a third trimester ultrasound, then it's looking for 21 days. And so that's how it's making that decision. So that's how due dater works. Let me show you the other pages real quick. You're just going to spin it over here and you'll see a fetal weight chart that's helpful. It's going to tell you the 10th, 50th, and 90th percentiles for different gestational ages. You can also come over again and see a trisomy 21 risk, and it'll show you the maternal age on the left, and in the middle you see the trisomy 21 risk, and on the right you see the overall aneuploidy risk. So that's any trisomy 21 as well as anything else. And on the right, you have a couple other options. One is that you can turn these ads on or off. Now, I always enjoyed these iAds because I think some of the ads are kind of fun, and of course, it also supports Due Dater and the academic OBGYN blog if you ever click on an ad. But if you've paid for this product, so if you don't want the ads to show up, just put iAds off and you won't see them. If you put iAds on, occasionally when you're in these chart pages, you'll see an ad, and also in the preferences page. If you're in the main page, I assume that you're doing work and you don't want to see ads, so you won't see ads on that page. We also have this last little mode here that's called REI mode, replace LMP with retrieval date. And if that's on, what we'll see, and you'll notice that the ad goes away when you come to this work page here, you'll notice that LMP became retrieval date. So that's when eggs were retrieved during an IVF cycle. And Basically, it's the same as LMP, but it's 2 weeks off. But now LMP has been replaced with retrieval date. And you'll notice that an LMP and a retrieval date are 2 weeks different. So April 26th is the retrieval date, but if we were in LMP mode, that would be April 12th. And basically, it's the same due date, but now it's being represented as a retrieval date. And if you put it in retrieval date mode, it'll stay that way until you change it, even if you quit out of due dater. So if you're an REI, certainly you may find that helpful. And that's about it. I hope that you enjoy using due dater.